After the Light Died, Chapters 10 and 11, Echoes in the Void. Robert approached the bar and pulled his speeder off into the parking area. The track and wheel combination was another modular design that could swap all wheels for all tracks for tracks and a ski, or any combination of the three. The perfect vehicle for a colonist on a world with variable weather patterns. That was the key to colonial construction. Modular setups. The house was assembled from prefab components by bots designed to assemble those shapes. The bots would then have their connectable tools swapped out and a new app downloaded which would recognize the new tools, and it would perform that function. Thus, the constructo bots would become agrarian bots or mining bots or whatever was required of them. Similarly, the bar he was pulling up to was as sleek and modular as anything else. The white base color of the cube building was now painted over to appear like a combination of red brick and oak. It was a saloon-style building, the proprietor having converted the sliding automatic door to a flip design that opened both in and out. The furniture had been modified in the same way, with the advanced materials used to assemble it covered in a veneer of wood or simple iron. The bar itself was shaped by hand-guided nano-construction to reflect an old-time long bar that came up just below chest height on a man. Of course, Robert knew, like everybody else, that the bottles at the back were mostly generative images and not real, reflecting what was on order from home, and that only a handful of bottles, those at the bottom, were real. He knew that everything was modern and advanced technology, and that the entire atmosphere of an early 20th century Colorado saloon was fake as fuck. But the beer was good, and that was all that mattered. He sat down at the bar and caught the attention of Harold Mortensen. "Harry, beer me!" Robert's voice was morose, to say the least, and Harold was quick to meet the request with a bottle of beer slid down the smooth, polished surface of the bar. "Still beating yourself up over shit?" Harold asked and stroked his finely maintained black mustache. Robert nodded with a glum face and looked down into the pint glass full of rich amber liquid. "Yeah, but how are you doing?" Harold shrugged and picked up a microfiber cloth meant to look like crude, stained-up white cotton and began to polish a used glass. "Let's just say I'm suddenly glad I'm a god-awful shot and ended up having to open a bar." "Uh-huh. Like you didn't have running your own bar in mind before we even got here," Robert said with a snort, and Harold only shrugged again. "Nah, just got lucky," Harold lied. "But listen." He looked around the bar. The patrons were few at this hour, and those were off in a corner playing cards. "I don't know if you're right or not, but you gotta keep it down. Something funny is going on." He set his cloth over his right shoulder and placed his hands flat on the surface just outside of Robert's arms. Robert's brow furrowed. "Don't be cryptic, Harold." Harold sucked in a breath and whispered in hoarse tones, "I'm not. It's just... When was the last time you heard from that scientist fella?" "A few weeks," Robert admitted. "Right. And just the other day somebody came around asking about who was trying to buy up all them artifacts. Tools, spears, things like that. And on top of that..." Harold trailed off, but Robert's attention was focused now more on the bartender than the beer he'd been given. "Yeah?" Robert pressed his friend, and Harold replied with an even softer tone. "Them caves, they've all been closed up. Demo crews hit some of 'em. Others got military-grade bars there. Every damn time another community is set up and more of them creepers get hunted down, some military folks start showing up and closing caves down, confiscating artifacts saying they're potentially toxic, and they're looking for folks who have 'em to turn 'em in." Harold replied and gritted his teeth. "I know them things ain't toxic," he hissed. "They're just local plants and stones, no radiation, no unusual chemicals, nothing. If they were, we'd already be dead now." Robert's frown deepened. "I'm the guy who set foot on beginnings first. I'm a national celebrity, sorta. You know, If somebody wants a word with me, fine, but I don't see any danger. Nobody's talked about anyone just disappearing or anything, right? This is bound to be just some misunderstanding. Harold huffed. Listen, Robert, I know you must have heard things back when we kicked them Xenos off Terra. Probably didn't believe 'em either, but they're true. Folks who got in the way of the liberation had a way of hunting dodo birds, if you know what I mean. And what do you think happened to everybody who had a hand in that? They're still around. I don't get what you're saying. Be straight with me, damn it! Robert hissed with obvious frustration and clenched his glass a little tighter in his hands. You think anybody back home wants to know we wiped out an entire sapient species here? God knows what kind of reaction that would get. Nobody much cares about a species of invasive pests, but if they really were people like you say, that's going to make problems for the wrong people. I gotta say, if graveyards were always honest, a fuckton of headstones would say, died of being a problem to the powerful. Do yourself a favor, keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and just run your farm and mind your damn business. I can't do that, Robert whispered with his head so close that the two men were almost cheek to cheek. It's not an if I am right, and we helped a genocide. We can't just let that be forgotten. I don't know how many of those people are left out there, but somebody's got to care enough to stop it. I'd rather them get forgotten than you, friend. But fuck me if you're going to listen, right? Harold asked, and Robert sat back and brought his glass of beer to his lips. He chugged with a deep thirst, the cold amber liquid splashing down into the pit of his stomach until the glass was half drained. Afraid not. People gotta know, and we gotta stop before we're worse monsters than what we overthrew. Thanks for the advice, Harold, and for the beer, but I'm afraid I'm not thirsty anymore. Robert pushed the glass away and was about to offer out his thumb for payment when Harold stepped away. No charge. Just take care of yourself, the bartender said with a grim expression, complete with furrowed brow etched upon his face. Thanks, Robert said, and left the bar far, far earlier than he'd meant to. If nobody here will listen, I'll go to the datanet. Somebody there will hear me. I'll show everybody at once, see if they can shut me up then. Robert thought as his speeder hummed with life and carried him the short way back to his wife and to his home. War on a deadline is always such a pain in the ass. Lucretia grumbled while she watched the pathetic forces of their neighbor scramble when Terran ships sailed out of the warp point and began their approach. Being able to control the battle far from the front lines gave her a distinct edge over the aliens. Intelligence reported that because of their continued reliance on radio waves, their ships were forced to act with more independence or function according to strictly dictated pre-planned battle strategies. By contrast, with a strong officer and NCO corps, the Absolution government encouraged independent action and small group tactics that did not depend on the flow of battle going exactly as predicted. The legacy of their small group actions in their own rebellion lingered on, and Lucretia focused on broad strategic objectives and acted as an AI-assisted command and control resource. But there was that damn deadline. Some of that opposition, the bulk of it, she guessed, was lined up in front of what passed for a heavily armed starbase. Their fleet numbers were small, but it was still more than intel suggested. Attack! Lucretia gave the order and set the cruisers of the fleet to take on the enemy ships, while the battleships targeted the more heavily armed and armored starbase. I wonder how long those will travel for. Is there a chance that in a few billion years they'll strike some inhabited world, start a war, send a people back to the Stone Age, or strike a Stone Age people and start a myth? Or will they just go on until the end of time, or strike some meaningless, empty world and leave only a crater somewhere for some scientist to puzzle over? It was an idle thought, one of no consequence compared to the battle. Terran ships retaliated with guided plasma missiles and phaser fire that ripped through shields like paper and melted the hulls of those ships unfortunate enough to be struck. Alien bodies were exploded outward into space on the unfortunate ships as the metal shells of the vessels were destroyed and all air expelled. The little dots of wiggling forms went still after a minute that must have felt like an eternity, and when the first alien ships detonated in space, the bodies were almost all incinerated, turned to ashes in space that would never be recovered for proper burial. The heavy battleships of the fleet almost mocked the kingdom's efforts, drawing close enough to see the faces of the alien crews through their sealed portholes, and to be seen in turn. Hammer blows battered the starbase, and marine tubes launched from the ships to punch through the starbase hull and begin their boarding actions. Intel, she guessed, was right at least about the relatively small crew sizes for the starbases. Lucretia swapped to a random Marine's helmet cam for a view of the fighting. For this fight, a limited run of ammunition was produced. So they do scream, she thought with quiet dispassion as the salt bullets hit the slug-like aliens. Scientists guessed that the internal organs of those creatures were extremely sensitive to salt contact, and as such a run of bullets that contained a layering of salt turned every round into a highly specialized biological weapon. As the last weapon platform was destroyed, the final levels were being overwhelmed, and the handful of alien survivors gave in. One alien frigate had managed to flee from the fight, and with no world in this system to occupy, just a handful of mining and solar operations to claim, there was no reason not to move on. Lucretia cycled through the other two fleets. Those had even less opposition. Still, I'm surprised that their armada managed to cobble together 8 whole ships for the fight. God knows what they cut corners on to get those ships out here in time. Lucretia Van Rothsman pondered and checked the strategic map, which showed almost 1/3 of the aliens' territory had fallen in such a short period of time. With nothing further reported from the crew, she simply said to them all, "Congratulations on your victories. In the name of Absolutia and all the Terrans under its wings, I commend you as heroes. Now go, move on to your next objectives." She then cut the comm line and went to relax. Such were the next few months. She would take reports on progress, arrive at Central Command to oversee the seizure of a system, relay the report of victory onto the official channels for all Terrans to celebrate, and then relax or oversee the construction of more ships of the fleet. There was no question about where the fight would end, and on the 8th month, only slightly off from their original projections, Lucretia was watching the armada approach the alien homeworld when the unfortunate king's face appeared on the open channel used for urgent communications. She flipped the line on and was greeted by a much thinner, smaller monarch than she recalled. "Your Majesty, or do you prefer to be addressed as King Sigorka? To what do I owe the pleasure? Are you feeling poorly? You were much larger when last we met. Have you missed a few meals?" She kept her voice kind and solicitous, as if she were inquiring about the health of an old friend. But he only bristled. "Sigorka was my father. I am Sinorka, his heir apparent. My father has tragically died. By his own hand, it seems. I am the new king, and I come to you to surrender. Land no soldiers on my world, leave my people in peace, and we will fight you no more." "There is an additional condition," Lucretia said, and she watched as the body of the slug being seemed to sweat more. The oozing slime coating thickened and ran over the length of his body to pool on the floor out of view. "What is it?" Sinorka asked, his eye stalks focused not on her but on a screen she was fairly sure also showed her approaching armada. "Your world will remain nominal independent. Govern your own affairs, but you will not have more than one starbase, build no colony ships, and produce no more ships of war than are needed to fend off pirates. Agreed?" she asked, but the king turned purple with rage. "That is more than one thing!" he almost shouted, but his eyes never left the monitor showing her people's approach. "Then we cannot reach an accord, and I will have to bomb you into submission," Lucretia replied, with a deadpan voice and a dismissive look away from the screen. but before her finger could press the disconnect button and order the attack. But the new king almost screeched, "Wait! Wait! We will accept your term. We will trade only with you and each other or those you allow through your space. We will have no ships of war. We submit. We surrender. Just do not bomb our homes." Deal. Fleet, stand down. Prepare for orders of redeployment. The war is over. She routed the direction to her armada, and it stopped in place. She killed the comm line and routed the information back home and wondered, will they make this day a holiday? No, probably not. She dismissed the notion and brought up the map of the known galaxy. Another alien nation was just the stellar southeast of this one. They had only 2 colonies to their name and a fleet no better than the slug creatures. As that thought came to her, she mused, "We have a good long time still before the divine assholes arrive to collect our blaster fire or resources. Why not take this one while we're in the area? We can be done in another year. Why not?" The thought had merit. Ensuring another danger to Terra would never rise up was too good an opportunity to pass on. Route all fleets to SB-117 and SJ-119 and wait for orders. She routed the order and then left to go talk the Khan into conquest, anticipating that it would be the easiest discussion since the time her mother asked her if she'd like another piece of chocolate.